What's up, my brother?
Looking good.
The original here now.
Good to see you, brother.
It is, man. It really is.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
Never laugh.
Good to be here, rest of the brothers. You know what? We had just come back from that parade.
I know.
Where you and I
and here's the parade, man.
Keep on,
appreciate you, man. You know, yeah, bro. And as I'm saying, man,
there's some speculation that we should jump him for giving us such a hard time
I have
during
been
the
told,
pledging process.
I've been told that I have maybe an ass whooping in the office.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can say is a poor ass, you can't take one whooping.
December 13th, 2008, there was a gathering of Gamma Theta brothers and their significant others in Louisville. We got together to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the founding line that crossed the burning sands of Omega, December 14th, 1968. We were the first black fraternity east of the Mississippi and south of the Mason-Dixon line on a white campus.
I love that.
Yeah. Anything else, you go for it.
Gamma Theta brothers know the history of the chapter. But as we come together to celebrate the chapter charter, July 5th, 1969, we will hear from the Omega men that were responsible for building for the future of Omega and Gamma Theta.
I pledged initially at Kentucky State University at Psi. Based on dollars or lack thereof, had to transfer back to Western and came back to Western and found that there was no organization for black folk on that campus. They were still waving rebel flags and singing Dixie. I encountered a good brother named Larry Ashby and talked to him about Omega Psi Phi, and he said, I got an idea, brother. Let's go on and do this thing and make some other things happen for this campus and for our people.
We met at a party.
Exactly. I didn't know if you were going to tell the truth on it, right?
Because at that time, didn't many of the brothers have automobiles? And being up on the hill and everything else happening down around 3rd and 2nd Street and Riverview Drive, Shake Rag, any brother that had an automobile instantly had some friends. We were at a party, and he and I hooked up because our dates at the time knew each other very well. And we just hit it off.
He had a knowledge of Western, and I had just transferred in from Kentucky State. And our idea was, why don't we have something here? Larry says, I've been here, and I've been thinking the same thing myself. And then that's when it started to cook.
Don brought from Kentucky State, having pledged that one semester. And I was just impressed with what Omega stood for. And I knew that was the organization that I wanted to help establish on the campus so that the black people that were coming, and there were more and more coming each year, so we had something to identify with so that we could have an avenue to have our voices heard, pretty much, because we didn't have that at the time.
They still waved rebel flags. Mm-hmm. They still played Dixie. There was nobody black in anything. So all of a sudden we're thinking like, okay, what is this? This makes no sense. So we were fairly good scholars to say, okay, we're wise enough to know how to study the situation and let's change it. I had the connection with the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Brother Herb Oldham, as I said earlier, said he'd work with us.
Both of them were fine, outstanding young men, very respectful, very studious, very dependable. I claim both of them as my son.
We're supposed to have somebody on campus to act as an advisor. Well, obviously there was no advisor for us on campus. But Brother Herb Oldham was a very respected man in the community. He had political connections and hookups. He had been the principal of High Street School. So when we did approach the administration, we got two things. The guy was named Dean Sagerbilt. Dean Sagerbilt was a member of the Sigma Nu fraternity. When we first sat down, and said, "Sir, we are interested in bringing the Omega Psi Phi fraternity to the campus." We explained what it was. We had the papers laid out for them because, again, we were very scholarly. I look back and think we did this thing extremely well. We prepared. We studied. And so when he read it, he sat back and put his hand on his desk, and I remember him looking at us and saying, "Well, why don't y'all join the white fraternities?" We knew we had him by the short hairs then, because we had gone to look at every constitution of the white fraternities on Western Kentucky University's campus, and every one of them had a clause in it that said that membership was available only to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And we said, "Sir, we would have considered joining a white fraternity." We had to play that. We didn't want it to be antagonistic. However, sir, all fraternities, and we didn't specify his, but he had a big Sigma Nu ring on. All fraternities on campus said that membership was open to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. I don't know if this will be edited out, but you can see red start to go from this guy's neck up. And you saw him start to fidget, this type thing. He told us, "Well, we'll get together and have another meeting." We said, "Sir, thank you very much. We knew not to cause any difficulty with this type thing." Then the next meeting was, "Who will you have to work as your advisor?" And we had contacted Brother Herb Oldham. And Brother Herb Oldham had met with them. They had worked an agreement out, which I pray that we'll have him to talk about that time. We had also contacted the 5th District reps, one brother's named Royal, and these brothers even went on and contacted the then Grand Bosses, H. Carl Moultrie. Because what we didn't realize is that there was not a black fraternity east of the Mississippi in the Confederate States of America.
On the white campus.
On a white campus.
Predominantly white college campus.
And these brothers, so I'm saying, we just little young knotheads, but these brothers realized that this right here is a truly historic piece. This was bigger than we knew. We really didn't know. And so these guys from Psi Tau started to come in and work with us. And the connections that they had, because everybody realized this is truly a first.
And going just a step back further, as we think about what the Kappa Qs really did on Weston's campus, it proved to everybody around that these black people can have an organization, do the things the way they are supposed to, have president, vice president, et cetera, et cetera. We were a service organization. And every time the college had like a little service project, we volunteered.
How were y'all allowed to come through the graduate chapter at Psi Tau and not say through a Tennessee State or Fisk at an undergraduate chapter?
I did know Brother Jeff and some of those guys from having been up there. So those were the guys that I asked and talked with. And when I talked to Brother Oldham, they started to connect up. So I guess it might have been just one of those. And Royal, and I'm saying he was 50. He may have been something else. He may have.
I think he was higher up in the organization.
I think he was too. He was out of Nashville down there. So they were there, and that may be, as you say, a question for Brother Oldham as to how it fell in place. But I do know this. It had never been done before, so I'm not sure anybody knew how to do it other than piecemeal as it went. And so
that the answer to that question may have had to go all the way to the national body. We're not sure. We weren't a part of that, what was going on behind the scenes, but we know that Bob Jefferson, William Shakespeare Dotson, as part of the Psi Tau organization, Lash LaRue, all those guys, once they heard what the possibility would be, once Don and I got in front of them and talked with them and interacted with them, they were behind it 100%. I guess they saw further into the future than we really did. We just wanted something to pull ourselves together and give us an organization to associate with on campus.
Talking about West Kentucky University, getting ready to talk about West Kentucky University. What were your feelings about establishing a chapter on a white college campus? Well, especially in at that time in the 60s and how race relations were.
Well, I was all for it because me having that experience earlier on a white campus, I knew what it was like because it was just 3 of us on the university campus. And I remember when you go into the student union building and you get coffee and you want to go sit down. If you go sit down, all the kids would get up and move away from you and leave you alone and so forth. And I knew how it could be. And also that I had some children that wanted to, I haven't mentioned my family, but I have 4 daughters and 1 son. And 3 of the daughters and the son attended Western Kentucky.
I think it extends the black experience because in a lot of instances, the blacks eat in the student union. They all sit together and so forth. So why not keep some of the facets of a Kentucky State college or a Kentucky State University where blacks can get together and socialize and have fun and marry one another and, just a normal kind of thing. We would be at a loss if we didn't have it. I think it'd be just about as bad as not having church and Christianity.
I feel fortunate that Psi Tau Chapter was aggressive enough through the efforts of the brothers of that chapter to bring 2 young men who were interested in Omega and bring them to Lexington, and the graduate brothers of this chapter taking them under their fold and bringing them into the fraternity, guiding them through their efforts at Western to establish the first undergraduate chapter at a white college in the 5th district, that is in Tennessee and Kentucky, and having also been fortunate enough to carry on that to 2 other universities in the state. So I feel fortunate with 3 other universities that in dealing with this issue and being the individual who was in the group of brothers who attended Western when you had your first line and reading those brothers over, I feel a part of that chapter, and I think all members of Psi Tau feel the same way.
If it hadn't have been for their leadership, Don likes to give me a lot of credit, and I appreciate that. But Don in particular and Larry were very instrumental in our having a chapter at Western Kentucky University. If it hadn't been for their perseverance and the way that they pushed and pushed and pushed, and their knowledge of Omega and their knowledge of objectives that they wanted to accomplish, if they hadn't kept just pushing it and pushing it, I went along for the ride. They may have wanted to put me on their coattail, but they did all the work.
What started to happen behind the scenes, that's why the Brother Oldhams and those guys are so important, because there were times they were meeting and talking with the vice presidents. And as you said earlier, the president at that time, who was Dr. Kelly Thompson, I'm not so sure that he wasn't relatively pleased with what was happening. Some of these, there was an interesting dichotomy of the time. There were the whites that just abhorred this, And like you said, there was support that we had from some whites that was real interesting. So that was another funny dynamic in that. So all of a sudden now, we got the approval to be an intermediate chapter. What is that? I'm not sure I've ever known of an intermediate chapter since that time. So some of the wisdom from these guys was what we were trying to study, and they were able to close the gaps. That's why I'm saying we were the first chapter of any black organization on Western's campus through what was called an intermediate chapter. Go ahead, bro.
And Don and I crossed the sands December the 15th, 1967 in Lexington. And when we got back to Western, the word got back before we did. And when we went back to our Kappa Q club, I don't know how many brothers were asking us, when you going to form a chapter on this campus?
You were talking to some of them.
When are you going to take me over? So we started a line. Yeah. We studied and found out what it took to be qualified to be a Lampado. We started a line. I don't know if we had 100% campus approval to do that or not. You know, I had gone off.
I don't know if we ever had 100% campus approval to do anything. We just did it.
I had gone off to graduate school then. Yeah. Because I left in that following fall of '68. But I do remember us going through some sort of a selection process for that first line. But we also began talking with the administration, like you were saying, about firmly establishing Omega on that campus. But we were still using the Kappa Q organization because it was fully recognized on the campus. I was in Lexington dealing with the Psi Tau brothers. Don and I burned up some telephone lines, and that little Corvair of mine just burned up some miles going back and forth between Lexington and Western. It's all a blur, you know, because things were moving very fast, and we never stopped. We never lost sight of the goal that we had established in our minds.
The beauty of this 40th and is going back, getting that information, because the information that I could see that they had then about the importance of what we were doing was based on the history that they brought to the setting. You know, that wisdom and history to say, look at what these young brothers are doing. Well, now we got a little bit of that gray hair, a little of that wisdom and history. So we talk about building for the future. That's what Omega has always done. At the turn of the century, when the founders put this thing together, they were building for the future. We stumbling around lost. These brothers realized these young brothers are trying to build for the future. We sat there 40 years later, and we're talking about building for the future at the turn of the 21st century. Racial uplift through cultural achievement and inspiration. I know you're the preacher, but I preach right there.
That preaches all by itself.